The waiter looked straight at me and said those 4 words that changed everything. "Your card was declined." My parents smiled. My brother's wife whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Looks like she can't even pay for dinner." The whole table laughed at me, but they had no idea what was coming next. If you've ever been the family disappointment who got the last laugh, smash that subscribe button. Hit like if you're ready for some serious family drama revenge. Trust me, this story will leave you speechless. Let's jump right in. My name is Cynthia, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a teacher at Lincoln Elementary School. My days start at 6 a.m. and end around 8 p.m. after grading papers and planning lessons. I drive a 2015 Honda Civic with a small dent on the side that I can't afford to fix. I shop at discount stores and clip coupons. I'm not glamorous, but I work hard for everything I have. In my family, I was always the responsible one, the one who helped with errands, the one who never caused drama, the one who stayed quiet when things got unfair. My younger brother Danny was completely different. He was loud, flashy, and the center of attention wherever he went. My parents worshipped the ground he walked on. While I was working 2 jobs to pay for community college, they bought Danny a brand new BMW for his 18th birthday. While I was eating ramen noodles in my tiny apartment, they paid for Danny's expensive private university. While I was saving every penny, Danny was getting handed everything on a silver platter. I thought I could live with the unfairness. I really did, until that dinner when they turned me into their family joke. Has your family ever treated you like a forgotten child? Share your story in the comments below, because I know I'm not alone in this. When Danny announced he was getting married, our house became a wedding center overnight. Mom spread bridal magazines all over the kitchen table like she was planning a royal wedding. Dad bragged to everyone in the neighborhood about the event of the century. Money was no object. Every time Danny's fiancé pointed at something in those magazines, my parents nodded and pulled out their credit card. Designer dress? Done. 5-course catered dinner? Absolutely. Live band? Of course. Open bar? Why not make it top shelf? When the final bill came in, I accidentally saw it on Dad's desk. $950,000. Almost $1 million for one day. Dad signed that check without even blinking and said, "Nothing's too good for our boy." Compare that to my wedding 3 years earlier. When I asked my parents for help with my small ceremony, Mom handed me a crumpled $50 bill and said, "You don't need all that fancy stuff, Cynthia. You're practical. Be grateful for what you get." I ended up getting married at the courthouse. Me and my husband Jake stood under those harsh fluorescent lights, holding coffee from the vending machine after we said our vows. The most romantic part was when the clerk said "next" to the couple behind us. At the next family dinner, my uncle made a joke. "Well, we know who the favorite child is now." Everyone laughed. My cousin added, $50 for Cynthia, almost $1 million for Danny. That's quite a difference. My face burned red while I pushed food around my plate. Mom just smiled like it was the funniest thing in the world. Dad raised his glass and made a toast to Danny's bright future, completely ignoring me sitting right there. Later that night, as I was helping clean up dishes, I walked past Dad's office and heard voices. Danny was on the phone with one of his friends, and his voice carried through the door. "Dude, they spent almost their entire savings on my wedding," he was saying, laughing. "And the best part? Cynthia got practically nothing. She's still broke as a joke." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just carelessness. They actually wanted it this way. They enjoyed seeing me struggle while Danny got everything. The night of Danny's wedding reception was supposed to be magical for him. For me, it felt like being erased from my own family. When I walked into that fancy ballroom with crystal chandeliers and gold decorations everywhere, I looked for my seat assignment. My parents, Danny, his new wife, and all the important relatives were sitting at the head table, right by the dance floor. Where was my name? I found it at a tiny table in the very back corner, next to my 85-year-old great-aunt who couldn't remember my name, and some distant cousins I hadn't seen in years. When I waved at my parents from across the room, they looked right through me like I was invisible. During dinner, I watched servers bring champagne and fancy appetizers to the front tables first. By the time they reached us in the back, half the good stuff was already gone. My cousin leaned over and whispered, "Guess we're sitting in the cheap seats tonight." I forced a laugh, but inside I was dying. Then came the speeches. Dad stood up with an expensive glass of whiskey and cleared his throat. "One of my children made me incredibly proud today with this beautiful wedding," he announced to the entire room. He paused dramatically, then added with a smirk, "The other one? Well, let's just say courthouse weddings don't quite measure up." The whole room erupted in laughter. I gripped my napkin so hard it ripped in half. Jake reached under the table and squeezed my hand, but it didn't stop the humiliation burning in my chest. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A week later, Danny called me up casually. "Hey sis, since you don't have kids or any real responsibilities, you can house sit for us during our honeymoon, right? Water the plants, walk the dogs, clean up. It's not a big deal." Before I could even answer, Mom's voice came through the speakerphone. "Cynthia, it's your duty as his sister. Danny deserves this break after all the wedding stress. Don't make this about yourself." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said yes, and spent 2 weeks taking care of their massive house while they were in Europe. But I kept track of every single penny I spent. Dog food, cleaning supplies, gas money for driving back and forth. Every receipt went into a folder. At school, I picked up every extra tutoring job and substitute teaching opportunity I could find. I worked weekends, holidays, whenever they needed someone. While they were posting vacation photos online, I was building something they didn't know about. What my family never realized was how carefully I kept track of my money. Every paycheck from teaching, I split it up. Some went to bills and groceries. The rest, no matter how small, went into a savings account they didn't know existed. It wasn't much at first, but after years of working extra hours and never taking vacations, it grew into something solid. And then there was the inheritance from my grandparents. They had left me $25,000 when they passed away 5 years ago. It wasn't a fortune, but it was supposed to be my safety net. My parents promised they were keeping it safe for me, invested in some account until I needed it. But after Danny's wedding, something felt wrong. I started asking questions. The answers didn't add up. So I went to the bank myself and requested all the statements. What I found made me sick to my stomach. Large withdrawals lined up perfectly with Danny's wedding expenses. The flowers, the venue, the band, the photographer, all paid for with my inheritance money. They thought I was too stupid to notice. They thought I was too weak to do anything about it, but I kept copies of everything. Every withdrawal, every date, every signature. While they were laughing at me and calling me broke, I was gathering evidence. My silence wasn't a weakness, it was preparation, and I was getting ready to make them pay. One evening, after a particularly long day at school, I sat down with my friend Maria in the teacher's lounge. She worked as a paralegal at a law office downtown. I pulled out my folder of bank statements and slid it across the table. "Can you look at these?" I asked quietly. She flipped through page after page, her eyes getting wider. "Cynthia, this money was legally yours," she said, pointing at the documents. "Your grandparents set up this account specifically for you. Your parents had no right to touch a single penny of it, let alone drain the entire thing." My heart pounded, but I also felt relieved. I wasn't crazy. The numbers didn't lie. This was theft, plain and simple. Meanwhile, my family was louder and more obnoxious than ever. Mom posted endless photos on Facebook of Danny's wedding, the honeymoon, their fancy new furniture. Dad bragged to anyone who would listen about how he spared no expense for his son's big day. Danny's favorite line at every family gathering became, "Not everyone gets $1 million wedding. Guess I'm just special like that." One afternoon, when I stopped by to drop off some groceries Mom had asked for, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. I froze in the hallway and listened. "Ha, she'll never stand up to us," Mom was saying with a laugh. "Cynthia's always been too weak, too scared to rock the boat." Dad chuckled in agreement. "Let her keep working those long hours at that little school job. That's all she's good for anyway. At least she's useful for something." Something inside me snapped. I walked out of that house without saying a word, gripping my car keys so tight they left marks in my palm. For years I had let their words hurt me because I believed I was powerless. But now I had proof. I had Maria's legal advice. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared. I was angry. I asked my parents and Danny to meet me on a Sunday evening. No fancy restaurant this time. Just us in their living room, the same place where they had humiliated me countless times before. They sat on their leather couch looking annoyed. Dad had his usual glass of whiskey. Mom had her arms crossed like I was wasting her time. Danny lounged in the recliner with that smug smile I knew so well. I set my folder on the coffee table and opened it slowly. "This bank account wasn't yours to touch," I said, sliding the first page across to Dad. He let out a sharp laugh. Oh, please, Cynthia, stop being so dramatic. That money was family money. We put it to better use. I looked him straight in the eye. It wasn't family money. It was my money. Grandma and Grandpa left it specifically for me, and these bank statements prove you stole it. His smile started to fade as he actually looked at the documents. Mom leaned over his shoulder, and I watched her face go pale when she saw the withdrawal dates. Danny snorted. So what if we used it? You're broke anyway. You wouldn't know what to do with that kind of money. I turned to face him. Actually, I'm not broke. I've been saving for years. I've been patient. And you three? You're about to find out what happens when you steal from the wrong person. The room went completely silent except for the sound of papers rustling in Dad's shaking hands. Cynthia, Mom started, her voice trembling now. You wouldn't take this outside the family. Think about what this would do to our reputation. I looked at her and remembered every dinner where they laughed at me, every toast that put me down, every corner table they stuck me at. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. Dad slammed his glass down so hard whiskey splashed everywhere. You wouldn't dare take us to court. I already did, I said calmly. Maria helped me file the complaint yesterday. The paperwork is already in the system. This isn't a threat anymore. It's done. Danny's smug expression melted completely. Mom's hands started shaking as she grabbed for the documents, and Dad, who always had something cruel to say, just sat there staring at the proof of what they had done. For the first time in my life, their laughter was gone. Instead, there was just the kind of silence that comes right before everything falls apart. 2 months later, the court case was over. The judge didn't need to think long about the decision. The evidence was clear as day. Every penny of my inheritance was ordered to be returned, plus interest and legal fees. My parents didn't fight it. They couldn't. The bank statements told the whole story. They had to sell Danny's BMW and take out a loan to pay me back. Their savings account that they had bragged about, completely wiped out. Danny's attitude changed overnight. No more bragging about his expensive wedding. No more calling me broke. The bills from that $1 million party were still coming in, and without Mom and Dad covering everything, he had to face the reality of what that kind of spending actually costs. The fancy honeymoon, the designer furniture, the luxury lifestyle. Suddenly, none of it was so easy to afford when they weren't stealing from me to pay for it. I didn't stick around for their apologies. There weren't any real ones anyway. Instead, I bought my first house with that inheritance money. Nothing huge or fancy, just a small 2-bedroom place with a garden, where Jake and I could finally build our own life. The best part? I invited my parents and Danny to the housewarming party. I wanted them to see what I had accomplished without their help. I wanted them to understand that their opinion of me was never the truth. When they walked into my house that I had bought with my money, I saw something I had never seen before. Respect. Maybe even a little fear. They realized that the daughter they had always underestimated was stronger than they thought. I learned something important through all of this. I spent years trying to earn their approval, twisting myself into the responsible daughter they wanted me to be. I thought if I worked hard enough and stayed quiet enough, they would eventually see my worth. They never did. And they never will. But standing in my own home, financially independent and legally vindicated, I realized something powerful. I didn't need their approval anymore. My life, my marriage, my career, I had built all of it on hard work and determination. They never understood. For the first time in my life, their silence didn't hurt me. It freed me. If you've ever had to stand up to family who treated you like you didn't matter, hit that subscribe button and tell me your story in the comments. I know how heavy it feels when the people who should support you are the ones trying to tear you down. This community gets it. Your experience matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Share your story below, and let's remind each other that real strength comes from standing up for yourself, even when family tries to keep you down. What's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever experienced? I'll be reading every single comment.